welcome back to another Sunday session with me, Angus Coutts. I got a little bit of feedback from the last video. People were asking some questions about some of the stuff I was talking about when I was talking about how I got into stand-up. First of all, someone asked me what level I saw my career at when lockdown happened. I'm still very much an open spot comic, which means, you know, I'm lucky to get booked on gigs. I get very few paying gigs. However, I'm in a bit of a weird transition-y phase as well, where I'm starting to get paid gigs. I'm starting to get booked on shows that are not your open mics or new act nights. Starting to get some fun gigs at the weekends at Monkey Bar Comedy. Have had me on a couple of Sundays. The Stand have extended my Red Ross from 5 minutes to 10 minutes. Whether or not I'm going to come back at that level again, I don't know. I hope so. I really would. Hope so. But at the same time, who knows what comedy's going to look like when this is all over, when the clubs will be able to open again. So yeah, I hope I'll be able to gig at that level again. I also asked if running Mirth Meltdown was beneficial to my career, and I would say yes, in terms of it gave me more stage time and it gave me the opportunity to get better in a room where I'm not being judged as harshly. So you can go out and you can try something out, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. No one cares. Whereas if you go to one of the big clubs and you do really poorly, then yeah, people might notice that, and it might affect your ability to get booked. So yeah, running it definitely has. As running the gig, it didn't get me booked more. I certainly didn't get booked off the strength of being someone that runs a gig. I think you have to get good and prove it somewhere at a quite high level before you're going to get booked in a proper gig. What it does get you is fucking loads of Facebook friend requests from people you don't know. That's what it gets you. Comedy's bad for that to begin with. I try not to add anyone unless I've met them multiple times. But some people that have never met me know that I run a gig, so they add me. But yeah, so that's the answer to those questions. Should we start the session? Let's talk about records first. Let's do it. Bam! This is what we're going to be listening to today. It's Natalie Prass. Her debut album from 2015, I want to say. Yeah, I think it was 2015. It was my favourite record of the year. It's signed, of course. I bought this off Natalie at a gig at the Electric Circus. First saw her supporting Ryan Adams, the unfortunately cancelled Ryan Adams, at the Usher Hall a few years back. That must have been 2014, perhaps, maybe. And then this album came out. It's brilliant. It was my album of the year. Beat Beyonce's Lemonade to my favourite album of that year. So yeah, stick this on and we'll have a whiskey. It feels really quiet. I'm going to turn it up. We'll see how that goes. Cool. So, whiskey. Back on the old Taylor Bacchus glass handmade. And I'm going with a little bit of a different whiskey today. I look forward to hearing some people tell me how awful it is, but I actually really like this. This is Nika whiskey, and it is from Japan. This was given to me as a gift for my birthday by my good friend and fellow shit hipster from the fringe at Bilge Babylons. So yeah, let's get wired into this. How have you all been? Yeah? Good? Sure. It's good stuff. It's got real kind of. If I'd been given that and not told it was Japanese whiskey, I would probably have assumed it was a Highland rather than Speyside. Maybe Highland or Speyside. Not certainly not Islay. Not as light as a Lowland. Not as briny as Campbelltown. It's good. It's good stuff. Anyway, we are going to be talking about books. I got asked about the books that are usually behind me in the bookcase. I picked 5 of my absolute favourites, and that have been really quite important to me as we've been going along. So yeah, I'll start off with probably the most influential book, the book that's had the biggest influence on my life, and that is How to Escape My Certain Fate by Stuart Lee. If anyone doesn't know what this book is, it is a collection of Stuart Lee's stand-up sets. 3 of his specials, his shows, his tour shows that have been transcribed and annotated with why certain jokes work. In terms of how to write comedy, it's perfect. This is a book that I read that made me then want to start trying to do stand-up. As you can see, I bought it off Stuart directly. He gave me a wee signature in there as well. Absolutely lovely guy, and I had it in my head that there was a ticket in here as well from the show, but there doesn't appear to be, so maybe that's a different Stuart Lee book that I've gotten. So yeah, reading this made me want to do stand-up. Hugely important. I would recommend to anyone if they want to get into stand-up. His other book, if you prefer Mild or Comedian, that's done as an EP. It's just one show that's in that. I've got that as well, and it is also brilliant. You might notice I've got a lot of Irvine Welsh in my books, if you're keeping an eye on what's behind me in the bookcase. My favourite Irvine Welsh book that I've got is Marabou Stork Nightmares. It was his second book, follow-up to Train Spotting. This is a first edition, and like the Stuart Lee one, this is going to be a bit of a theme here, guys. This one is also signed, apparently. I'm sure it is. I've definitely seen it as signature in it. Yeah, there it is. Irvine Welsh. So yeah, Welsh signed this one. It's brilliant. It is dark. If you think Trainspotting's dark, then this is intensely dark. Friend Ross Pilcher, who's a journalist with the Daily Record, he absolutely loves that one as well. It is one that we've talked about quite a lot. I really like this song. I got to see Natalie Prass a couple of times. She's amazing. I'm going to give you a little bit of a admission here. On at least 2 occasions have I got really drunk and then messaged her at like 4 in the morning telling her how much I love her music. She messaged back once. I would say that makes us friends. Nope. Another book for you. God, I read this when I went on a holiday for a friend's wedding to Spain, and it was one of the hardest things I've ever read, and I think everyone should read it. It really changed how I behave in quite a lot. It's a Penguin modern classic, and it is The Uninhabitable Earth by David Wallace Wells. Pretty much just telling us exactly how things could go over the next 100 years, but also more specifically in the next 30 to 50 years. And you don't need me to tell you. You all know that there's something going catastrophically wrong within the climate. However, I don't think I've ever read an opening sentence of a book, when I know what the subject matter is, that's punched me quite as hard as this one, which is, it is worse, much worse than you think. The slowness of climate change is a fairy tale, perhaps as pernicious as the one that says it isn't happening at all and comes to us bundled with several others in an anthology of comforting delusions. The global warming is an Arctic saga unfolding remotely that is strictly a matter of sea level and coastlines, not an enveloping crisis sparing no place and leaving no life undeformed. That it is a crisis of the natural world, not the human one. That those two are distinct, and that we live today somehow outside or beyond, at the very least defended against nature, not inescapably within and literally overwhelmed by it. That wealth can be a shield against the ravages of warming. That the burning of fossil fuels is the price of continued economic growth. That growth and technology it produces will inevitably engineer a way out of environmental disaster. That there isn't any analogue to the scale or scope of this threat in the long span of human history that might give us confidence in staring at that. We're fucked. That's essentially what this message is. It tells us what's going to happen with countries, what's likely to happen with the land itself, which parts are going to be livable, which parts won't be. And I'm not going to lie, if you've had a kid in the last year, they're going to have to deal with this. So yeah, you should definitely read The Uninhabitable Earth by David Wallace Wells. Something cheery, I'm going to give you a book now that is one of my favourites that I own, but I've never read. If you're a horror movie fan, you might recognise the front cover. This is The Hellbound Heart by Clive Barker. Now, I've never read this for one very simple reason, and that is this is a first edition, and it is also signed by Clive Barker. Now, these are rare. This is the rarest book that I own. The Hellbound Heart is a novella. You can see it's much shorter, compared to David Wallace Wells. It is a very skinny little book there. It usually comes as part of a collection of other books, so in an anthology. Very rarely is it off by itself. I asked a online bookshop to value it for me, to tell me how much they think this would be worth, and with it being quite rare, plus the fact that it's signed, plus the fact that the Hellbound Heart is what the story of Hellraiser, the first Hellraiser film, that kind of cult following, they put a value of about $200 on it, and that is, when I say bucks I mean pounds, sterling, real money, not your fake money in the States. So yeah, £200, which is wild for a tiny little book like this. So this one's kind of like my little retirement plan there, because when Clive Barker dies, then cha-ching, you know, I've got, God, that makes me sound awful, doesn't it? So, oh, when Clive Barker is dead, I'm gonna sell it. No, I don't mean like that. No, the last one I want to talk about really quickly is huge. We're going from one of the smallest in my collection to now possibly the biggest. Look at that. Look at that. That's about as wide as my face. Not as wide as my face. Not much as wide as my face. This is Ron Chernow's Alexander Hamilton. This is the book that Lin-Manuel Miranda read before writing the musical Hamilton, which is what it says right there. I'm a huge fan of the musical Hamilton. I've got the full Broadway cast recording on vinyl, and I keep on thinking that I might stick it on, but the problem is, it's so lyrically brilliant that you don't want me talking over it. You know, a little bit of background music, and I'll put links down so you can check out Natalie afterwards as well. I don't think I could do that with the Hamilton soundtrack. Maybe though. If you really want to see me do the Hamilton soundtrack, stick a comment down below and tell me about it. This is great. When it comes to really kind of big, hefty, weighty tomes about historical figures, especially those from the 1700s, you get quite a lot of source material quoted back at you. So you get quite a lot of, you know, their letters, their diaries, their speeches. And people talked funny back then. They used different words that they wouldn't use nowadays. Phrasing was different, writing was different, and it's quite impenetrable for modern readers. Ron Chernow is fantastic because he manages to distill that, and yeah, it's a much easier read than you might think. So if anyone's seen Hamilton or heard Hamilton and they want to have a read of something, that's one that I'd recommend. It's great. Apparently his George Washington's great as well, but they're so interconnected. I just don't know how much it can be much different than there. Anyway, I'm going to drink this whiskey, finish the song, and I'll tell you a couple other things. There are a few other books that I own that I think are really important to me as well. Hings by Chris McQueer, HWFG by Chris McQueer. These two are great because Chris is a guy that I know through Twitter, and he wrote stories. When Chris published his first book, Hings, I kind of realised that that's something that people can do. They can just do something creative and be creative. And again, it was one of those things that gave me a little kick up the arse to go and get into stand-up. Also, there's Richard Cobb, a really good friend of mine from back when I was working at RBS. One of the very few people that I've stayed in touch with since then. He has released about 17 books in the last year. He's run a lot. I've got one here in the house. It's The Easier to Digest Years, Part 1. So you should check him out on Amazon as well. I'm a huge Harry Potter fan as well. Love Harry Potter. I know that's not the coolest thing to be able to say, but I do love Harry Potter. And also Mouse is one that you should definitely check out. It's a graphic novel, a really important graphic novel. Win a Pulitzer Prize or something like that. It's really, really cool. It's one of the greatest pieces of work regarding the Holocaust, and it's a graphic novel. So yeah, it's great. Anyway, thank you for tuning in. I hope you guys enjoyed this show. If you want anything else in particular, stick a comment down below. Cheers.